I would like to thank our sponsors, Vital Garden Supply, Ag Natural, Grow Generation, Gold Mountain Distribution, Elevation 24/7, Origin Group Law, Rolling Hills Bookkeeping, Vajra Consulting, Humboldt Seed Company, Hometown Hydroponics, SC Labs, and Foresters Co-op. Thank you all for supporting the work of a sustainable cannabis industry here in Nevada County. As I said, my name is Diana Gamzon. I'm the Executive Director here at the Alliance. For those that are unfamiliar with the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, we are a nonprofit trade association that exists here to represent the local cannabis industry. Our mission is threefold. Number one is education, to supply information to help support a thriving cannabis industry. In addition, we provide advocacy to the local industry, advocating for reasonable regulations and ordinances. And our third part of our mission is connection, to ensure that the cannabis industry is connected, that we remain strong, and that we have representation at the local, state, and national level. Our membership base is made up of those that support the cannabis industries, cannabis businesses, and cannabis farmers. 90% of all permitted farmers in the county are members of the Alliance, and together we share resources, we collaborate on projects, we support one another. Our values at the Alliance are built upon environmental sustainability, rural economic growth, craft farming, and community building. And each year our members are recognized throughout the state in awards such as the Emerald Cup and other publications. So I want to just chat very briefly about our Get Legit educational program. This workshop is one of our offerings of our Get Legit educational program, which includes regulatory seminars and workshops, as well as business skills trainings, regenerative farming workshops. We also have a buddy program, which matches permitted farmers up with those that are entering the application process. This has been very successful to help new applicants. We also have regular support groups for those that are going through the permit process. And we also have an online hub where we share a whole bunch of information. That's just a little snippet. And today is our county cultivation workshop, of course. And on Thursday, January 21st, we have a workshop on environmental compliance, and on February 4th on the state application process. We are currently in a crash course for submitting your application. This is a bit extended out in the fall, but right now we want to make sure that the applicants, that you have the information so that you can get your applications in hopefully by the end of February. It's always best to start the application process early and to make sure that you're submitting your application so that you have enough time to go through the application process and submit and put plants in the ground come springtime. And our next member support group, or excuse, our next support group following this call is going to be on Monday, January 11th. So mark that down. If you know, as a follow-up, we're going to have some county staff on that call, and that'll be a great place to have some follow-up discussion. And I have just two more announcements, which is next week we are having a call on market data insights. This is going to be with a regional statewide strategist in the cannabis industry to talk about market trends and analysis. We're doing this so that people can start thinking about harvest planning and sales forecasting. And then the week or on January 20th, we are collaborating with our very own Catalyst Bioamendments. They're located at the Woolman School, and on turning your native clay soil into rich, fertile soil. So lots happening on the educational front. Oh, and then in February, we're having a workshop on growing for terpenes. So definitely stay in touch. We've got lots to help the community. And you can stay in touch with us via Facebook, Instagram. We send out newsletters twice a month. You can always email us as well. And If you have any questions about membership, how to join the Alliance, how to get involved, just reach out to us. I am going to turn this over to Craig. Am I turning it over to you?
I can just say something real quick, but Jeff's going to be doing the majority of the presentation and doing some introductions, but just thank you for having us. It's always fun doing these. You know, we have a regulatory program here in the county that's a little over 1.5 years old, so it's still super young, even though cannabis has been legacy here for forever, essentially, in our community. It's just something we want to continue to be able to support, and we are here to support that industry. We'll be doing things in the coming years to show that support, whether that's regulatory streamlining, permit processing, or anything else. We're here for you. Everybody here on this call are great to deal with and work with. They really want to see you succeed. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jeff Merriman.
Thank you. Is the PowerPoint up?
As that PowerPoint's coming up, I just want to say how grateful we are for the collaboration between the Alliance and the cannabis industry and county staff. It's really been a collaborative effort working together over these past couple of years, and thank you all for being here.
Okay, I'll go ahead and pull up the presentation.
Amy, you might want to change your name, I think, because you clicked on my link that has you as me.
What? You don't want a doppelganger? Come on now. Hold on a second.
Remember, Jeff, are you seeing the presentation?
No. Anybody else see it? There we go.
You have it now?
Yeah. So good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Merriman. I manage the Cannabis Compliance Division for Nevada County. Really, our goal today is to kind of give you a in-depth overview of the permitting process. So from that initial submittal all the way to approval. There's a lot of people here from Community Development Agency, which is going to be hands-on with your project, as well as the local fire districts. There's a lot of slides. It may seem overwhelming, but just relax. Don't worry about writing stuff down. We're going to post it to our website. So if you have any follow-up questions later, you want to go back and look at it, you can always find it there. If you have questions that come up during the presentation, go ahead and use the chat box. We're going to try to answer them to the best we can live. If there's any left over at the end, we'll make sure we get to all of them before we leave. Next slide. So with that, these are some of our CDA department contacts. With the current building restrictions, our staff are working at full capacity, whether in the office, teleworking, etc. So don't hesitate to reach out. We're here. Leave a voicemail if we don't pick up, and we'll get right back to you. Staff are in the office. They're in the field. We're conducting inspections. We have a lot of virtual opportunities as well, which we'll get into a little bit later. That make the whole submittal review process a little bit easier given the current pandemic. Next slide. I apologize for the delay. It looks like the slides take a few seconds. So as I mentioned, we're going to review the entire process from start to finish. We'll discuss some of the main differences between ADPs and CCPs, and then we'll dive a little more into the ADP process. Touch on the annual cannabis permit, go over some of the cultivation canopy and support area ideas and layouts. We'll get a little more granular on some of the operation plan requirements and regulations with fire, EH, everybody involved in that. And then lastly, we're going to finish up with some tips and tricks for success. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Thomas Maioli. Thomas is with the Cannabis Compliance Division as well.
All right, thank you, Jeff. As Jeff said, my name is Thomas Maioli. I'm with Cannabis Compliance. I work directly with Jeff, Jason Besaw, Jessica Rist here, and just looking through our list, I see a lot of our attendees today are, we have some consultants, we have people we've exchanged emails with recently, and some of our already permitted growers who are going into their third season this spring with us. So I appreciate the support of those existing applicants. So this is where it begins. This is where the parcels, for those of you looking, are going to want to pay close attention to these next slides. So for your commercial medicinal cannabis cultivation permit, we're looking for parcels zoned AG, EA, or FR. That's our agriculture, exclusive agriculture and forest zoning districts. You're going to be looking for parcels 2 acres to 4.9 acres. And that's going to only allow indoor only. That's 500 square feet of cannabis canopy area. Also, you can look for parcels that have 5 acres to 9.99 acres, and that will allow you to get into multiple license types, indoor, mixed light, outdoor, and that allows 2,500 square feet of canopy area. And with these applications, you can have a mix of indoor, outdoor, mixed light. It doesn't just have to be one license type. So 10 to 19.99 acres will get you into 5,000 square feet of canopy, while 20 and above will get you to our maximum 10,000 square feet of canopy area. Okay, next slide. So also, when you're looking at parcels and you're looking at acreage, you're also going to want to look for if the site can meet our setback requirement. So any cannabis canopy area or support area is going to have to be 100 feet from the property line. So keep that in mind when you're looking at parcels. If you're taking topography issues, property lines, roads, see if you can make the 100-foot setback work. So we do have the ability to have some setback variances to 60 feet. Please be aware that that's discretionary. There's public hearings required with that. Impact findings are required with that also. So the best thing to do is look for parcels and design your project to meet that 100 square feet, or excuse me, 100-foot setback. Next slide. So also, we're going to want to look at the 1,000-foot setback from sensitive sites. So sensitive sites are going to include schools, churches, parks, daycare centers, youth-oriented facilities. So keep in mind summer camps. We have summer camps that are considered youth-oriented facilities, and then we do allow a site reduction to 300 feet for state and federal parks. So when you're getting closer to the rivers, we have some state parks that the requirement is to be 1,000 feet, but with discretion, with review at the staff level, with materials you support, that could potentially be reduced to 300 feet. Next slide. Okay. So we have this. This has been a question, and it's actually included in our ordinance. So we require a resident to be on site of a cannabis site. However, if you have an adjacent parcel under common ownership, the canopy area can be on that site. So keep in mind, though, you'll be tied to the largest acreage. So if you're proposing a 10,000 square foot site and you have, you want to put 5,000 square feet on a large parcel, you could put the balance on the smaller parcel as long as the canopy area does not exceed that allowed of the parcel size. So it could be all on one parcel adjacent, or it can be split amongst, but never shall the canopy area go over what's allowed for that parcel size. if you need clarification on that, please feel free to email. That seems to be one of our more complicated slides. Next slide. Okay, this is our transition period. So transition period is for you to identify what may not currently be up to code or in violation on your project site. You know, start thinking about grading that was done previously, unpermitted sheds, outbuildings, solar panels, things like that. We will allow those to be put into the 2-year transition plan as long as they are not health and safety related. Like if there's an issue, it's a fire hazard, or just life safety issues, you know, those can't be included. So what you do, if you propose them in your application, if appropriate, we can include them into the 2-year transition plan. Please be aware for upcoming applicants, transition period will sunset on May 14th, 2021. So be sure to get those applications in so you get benefit from transition plan. Okay, so as I stated earlier, a residence is required for our cannabis cultivations permit. However, if you submit a building permit for a residence and have that residence permit issued with RV occupancy, and you have that permit issued, you make a step towards development, a significant step, and you have your well and septic in place, we can, you know, continue processing your cannabis application, and you could begin to allow cultivation on site while you're using the RV full time as the residence, which also provides, you know, security for your cultivation site while you develop the residence. Next slide. So if any of our applicants are interested in offsite processing, you know, submit that with your application that you want to propose to include offsite processing in your application. The offsite processing has to be located in a structure that is permitted and finalized for that use. So you're going to want to, you know, ensure before any processing is completed that it is finalized and approved for that use. No more than 6 vehicle trips per day is allowed for the offsite processing. And of course, you would need the appropriate state license. And I believe,
All right, my name is Lucas Cannell, and I am representing the planning department. So I'll be talking about our 2 permit types, starting with administrative development permits. These are 2,501 to 10,000 square feet of mature canopy. They are processed through the planning department, so we'll be the lead agency working as your project managers. And it's an administrative review process, so it doesn't go to hearing, it's completely in-house. And the deposit is $2,022.52. And the annual cannabis permit, which you pay on an annual basis, it covers your inspections, is $919.26. The general process is that we will look to make sure that we have received a complete submittal with all of the elements of the project, and these will get routed out to different agencies for comments. Within 30 to 45 days, definitely erring on the 30-day side, we try to get you your comments back. If there's any issues, you'll be given notice of what those incomplete items are, and we'll be looking for a resubmittal. Once you have completed the incomplete items, you will turn it back into the planning department and will be routed to the relevant departments again for review, which is another 30-day process. Once you're approved, you'll receive conditions of approval that, once they are completed, will result in the finalization of your ADP, and you can be inspected for your annual license to begin cultivating. The smaller of our 2 permits, which is done through the Cannabis Compliance Division, is our Commercial Cannabis Permit, or CCP. These are for 2,500 square feet or less. It's also an administrative review process, and it's a little bit cheaper. It's $1,638.90, but with the same annual license, which was $919.26. It's a very similar process. The main difference is that it's a 14-day review period, but for both permits, we'll be looking for a complete submittal before we will route it. It goes to relevant agencies, which are the same agencies as with the ADP. And if you have incomplete items, we will be asking for a resubmittal with a list of incomplete items and another 14-day review. So every time for the CCPs, it's a 14-day review until you get to your conditional approval phase. As long as it takes to complete your conditions, once they're met, your CCP is finalized and you can move on to your annual cannabis permit. Once you are in process, meaning we've taken in your complete application, it will be up to the applicant to track your status. This can be done online through the Citizen Access portal, which has the URL right there. You'll use your permit number to track the review and look for incomplete items from different departments. If you have any issues, each department will have a contact. You can email us. We'll also have phone numbers, so you can call us. We can walk you through our incomplete items. And you're also welcome to reach out to whoever is the manager for your project. If it's an ADP, that'll be in the planning department. If it's a CCP, it'll be a member of our cannabis team. The main things that will help with getting through this process is having professionally completed applications. We're looking for details on your project so that we can do a complete assessment and know exactly what you're proposing. The more information we have, the easier it is for us to figure out how we're going to approve your project. So we're looking for all improvements on site. That's existing improvements, residential improvements, as well as all new and future proposed improvements for your cannabis operation. We're looking for these to be properly labeled and the setbacks to be shown to ensure that you're not encroaching in any sensitive resources or property lines. Contiguous canopy areas shall be shown, as well as the setbacks to the property lines and structures so that we know that you're meeting those standards. Support areas also should be shown with their setbacks, as well as the scope of work and a vicinity map showing where in the county your project is located. We're also looking for an impervious surface area. Each zoning comes with its own maximum impervious surface area. So that's anything that you put on your property that doesn't allow water to penetrate the soil. Could be hard surfaces like concrete, could be greenhouses, could be your residence. You'll total those up, give them as a percentage of your lot size, and we'll ensure that you're not over the limit, which for most of these in ag and AE is 10%, in FR it's 5%. We'll be looking for access roads and driveways, making sure they meet all current fire safe standards. And for the vicinity map, please show your section, township, and range. Help us locate where in the county your parcel is located. Other things we'll be looking for is on-site water storage if it's required with fire department connections. This is usually required when you have indoor facilities that may catch on fire. Hazardous material storage areas and setbacks from any sensitive areas such as your well. Septic well leach repair areas with setbacks shown to ensure that you're not going to have any contamination issues. Utility locations to ensure that there's no issues of you placing something on top of one of your utilities or where it shouldn't be, as well as topography and slopes on site so that we know exactly how steep the area of proposed disturbance is. And then a very important one is anytime that you're within twice the setback distance, we're going to be looking for a boundary line verification completed by a licensed surveyor. This essentially says that if you're within 2 times of a setback distance, we just want to make sure you're not in that setback, because if it comes out later, then you're going to have an issue with legal non-conforming status, which can cause problems in the future. And finally, security and screening measures to keep your operation secure, but also not visible from any public areas. Some tips are to hire experienced licensed professionals. We have some really great professionals in the county that have done plenty of these. They can help you get through the process a lot faster because they know the pitfalls and probably have experience in themselves. Include multiple sheets on your site plan if you believe it's necessary. If you cram all of your details onto one sheet, it may be difficult for us to read. Making these simplistic and able for us to interpret is important because the more time we spend on these, the more money it can cost you. And so we want to get through these as fast as possible, get you approved, but also not cost you a lot of money. Show all improvements from your operation on your site plan, including possible future improvements. This can include things that won't be implemented until future years. Especially the administrative development permits can be implemented in phases over a 3-year period. So if you're not planning on implementing something until 2022, just label it as such so we know not to expect that building when we come out in 2021. Quality site plans are your best chance for a complete submittal, and they need to be to scale so that we can interpret exactly what you're trying to show us. Essentially, you're giving us a 2D interpretation of what we're expecting to see on the ground when we come out for an inspection. This is an example of a site plan. It's more of a general layout like we would expect. If we could actually go to the next slide, I think that's a better example. So this is a great example of a site plan and what we would like to see. You can see it has a notes section so that anything that you have questions about from the site plan itself can be referenced in the notes section. It has totals for both the canopy area and the support area. It has easy layouts and it calls out the dimensions on everything, which is very important. That way we're not sitting there with a ruler adding everything up, because the more time that takes, unfortunately, the more it costs to review that permit. You'll be required to submit a security and operation plan. This will show security measures and site and floor plans for your structures. It'll show the location of hazardous materials on the site plan so we know where they are. This can also be important for the fire department to know. You'll want to provide information for security lighting, what and where, so we can ensure that you're not shining a light on your neighbor's property or ensuring that you have lighting that meets our standards. Gate and fencing access control measures. This is important not only for security, but also we'll have requests for access for the fire department to get through your security measures. It's required to have an on-site presence. So someone that works on the cannabis operation will be required to live on site so that as an extra security measure, if anything happens, that person is available. Security of valuables and related business would be security of your products essentially and your money. Is very important. We want to make sure that you're keeping it in an area where it's not easy to be stolen. And that you have locks and access controls as well to keep not only intruders, but maybe children from wandering into your operation. And then an operation plan is very important. We want to know how many employees you have, how you'll be transferring your product, the hours of your operation, vehicle trips, equipment operation on site, waste removal methods, really just lay out your operation so we know exactly what you're planning to do and make sure that it's not going to be any nuisances to the neighborhood or something that doesn't follow our ordinances. Lighting, if it is going to be proposed for your operation, basically you don't want to do what we're showing in this picture. Any light pollution caused at night is against our ordinances. So we'll be looking for you to have something in your lighting plan showing how you will not be creating light pollution. So exterior lighting is required to have shielding so that it's downward facing, not pointing up into the sky and blotting out the stars. We're looking for interior lighting to have either blackout tarps pulled over greenhouses at night, only operating during daylight hours, some sort of method where we aren't going to have an issue with lighting up the neighborhood at night. You'll be required not to have your cannabis visible from publicly traveled areas. This will be right-of-ways like roadways and publicly traveled private roads. Essentially, your neighbors have a right not to stare at the operation, but it's also a security measure to make sure that people aren't plotting to maybe steal it if they can see exactly where this product is being grown. You'll also be required to show noise standards for any noise producing equipment, whether it's an HVAC unit, a generator, fans. If you have multiple sources, we'll probably require a noise study, but if you have 3 sources or less, you can do your own equations to show exactly what the decibel ratings will be at property lines, and also include decibel ratings from the manufacturer so that we can verify exactly how much noise each piece of equipment is producing. You'll also be required to produce a copy or certificate of deposit or bond for $5,000. If you have anything that is out of compliance currently on your property, you can turn in a transition plan currently, which over the next 2 years will let you bring it into compliance. You'll be required to produce a dust control plan so that if there is any nuisance dust being produced by your operation or the construction of your operation, we know how it will be mitigated. Weighing device registration with our ag department so that we know that you have accurate scales. And then you'll be working with your fire department, Penn Valley Consolidated or the Truckee District with your submittal documentation. They'll be turned into the county, but then will be routed out to your local fire department for review. For the ag department, they'll want to know any type of pesticides or herbicides you'll be using and ensuring that those are legal for cannabis use. For the planning department, we'll be looking for biological resources information to make sure you're not encroaching on environmentally sensitive sites. Environmental health will want to look at your hazardous waste statement forms to ensure that you have safe storage, secondary containment, and that you don't have anything, you're not exceeding the thresholds for allowable hazardous waste storage. We'll also be looking at your North Central Information cultural sensitivity letter, which essentially says if there was a historical event on your site, we may want to have you prod around a little bit better with an archaeologist to see if there are any cultural resources that may be disturbed during the construction or operation of your operation. And if you have any LLC information, we just want to know who's involved so that we can make sure that we are getting everybody covered in our liability statements. You'll also be required to turn in your light control plan, as we said earlier, and your operation plan. If you are encroaching on any sensitive sites, we will ask for you to have a habitat management plan prepared by a qualified biologist. We have a list at the planning department we'd be happy to provide if you do need it. This could be a water resource protection plan with a management plan. It could be for oak trees. There's quite a few things that can trigger this. So if you have any questions about resources on site, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to look at an aerial or a general assessment of your property to see if I can see anything. Otherwise, just a general assessment of your property done by you or a biologist will be required upon submittal. If you're planning on removing trees, you can talk to our CAL FIRE Forestry Division. They'll want you to do a less than 3 acre conversion permit for the removal of those trees, just so that they know if you've been removing any timber species. We'll also be routing all of these things to different agencies for comments. So if you miss anything on the first submittal, we'll try to catch it for you and we'll let you know what you missed. So I'll be turning this over to Jason from our Cannabis Compliance Division.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Besaw. I'm a Cannabis Compliance Officer. I work extensively with Thomas and Jeff. And ultimately, I'm one of the people that will come out at the very end to sign your final approval for your ACP. And so what I'll be talking about is just that, kind of your ACP. It's automatically applied for at the same time when you submit your application for your ADP or your CCP. So keep in mind, your application is different than your ACP or your annual cannabis permit. They're two things. So once your ADP or CCP is approved, you still need your annual cannabis permit to be signed off on. And so in order to get your ACP issued, you need to pay any outstanding fees. That fee again is $919 per year. It is renewed every year. That is your responsibility to contact the county to get that renewed prior to expiring. And it doesn't go calendar, it doesn't go December to December. So if you get your ACP signed off and approved in March, then March will be your renewal period every year. So things to keep in mind. Now your pre-cultivation inspection needs to be conducted within 90 days of your ACP issuance. So again, you're going to pay your fees. We will issue your ACP, and then within 90 days of that being issued, likely myself or Thomas will come out to do your final inspection. And what we're looking for is to make sure that everything you showed us on your site plan is what's there in reality. It has to be conducted prior to planting. It needs to be scheduled with us. We can usually work with you. And then, let's see. We have to have your once your ADP or CCP is approved, you'll have a stamped set of site plans. You'll have a job set and an office set. We keep the office set. You'll have the job set. That is the officially approved plan that you need to have on site with you. We would absolutely like you or anyone involved out there with the inspector. That way, if there are any issues or corrections, we can address those right there on site and give you clear direction on how to fix those. The fire department will need to sign off on your ACP prior to us coming out. In some instances, we can coordinate with fire to go out at the same time, but cannabis compliance will be the last one to sign off on your ACP. So if you get us out there before fire, we can look over everything, we can approve it, but we cannot sign until fire signs. So it just creates a little bit of a delay or an extra step. So at the very least, try and get fire out there beforehand, if not at the same time as us. You do need a passing inspection. Once we sign off on your ACP, you are good to go. And then, like I said, if there's any kind of issues that don't match your site plan, we'll give you a corrective notice. Now, cultivation inspections, these can be conducted at random. Usually, we'll try and give you a heads up. They will be conducted by either myself or Thomas, most likely. Sometimes there are no notice inspections, and that's just to keep people honest. We have sometimes come across non-compliance, whether willful or just maybe unknowingly, and it is possible that we could revoke your ACP. So we ask that everybody stick with their site plan and what they submitted to us. Minor items, we can give you time to correct it. And then additional inspections may be required throughout the year based on what we see or what we find. Now, when it comes to canopy, this is something people often ask. We need, as inspectors, when we come out there, we want to make sure it's easily measurable. It does not have to be contiguous, meaning it doesn't have to be one big area, but it has to be defined either by walls, shelves, the walls of the greenhouse, or fencing. It has to be clearly defined on your site plan or your floor plan and show the square footage. So this image is a basic graphic showing possibilities. So it doesn't all have to be indoor, outdoor, or mixed light. You can have a combination thereof. And so what this shows is a total of 10,000 square feet of canopy, both indoor, outdoor, and mixed light. So you're absolutely able to mix those. Next, I have a sample here. Again, this is not all inclusive, but these are samples of what we want to see the canopy layout look like. Up on the top, we have mixed light or indoors, showing aisle space and the dimensions of your planter boxes. Down below, same thing. On the bottom right, that depicts possibly a structure where not all of it is going to be used for cannabis. And again, that just needs to be clearly labeled on your site plan. Now, this slide will depict possibilities for outdoors. Every parcel is unique, every shape is different, and sometimes you have to work around terrain or vegetation. Again, what I want to hit here is it needs to be clearly measurable and identifiable because the plant cannot exceed the boundaries you have marked. So when we go out for an inspection, a cultivation inspection, the plants cannot exceed what you have marked for your canopy area. So you have to allow growth of your plant in consideration for that. Now, this slide, if you want to use cloth pots, we have allowed that. Certainly a lot of measuring here. Straight rows make it easier for us. But what this depicts is the red dot is, say, a 300-gallon pot. And then what you need is stakes. T-posts are common, rebar, wooden stakes, though those tend not to last very long. So when we come out there, we can measure. So what this allows is your plant to grow in the cloth pot, extend over it, and then what we have is, again, clearly identifiable corners where we can come and measure, look down the line, and see if any of that plant is growing outside of the canopy. What we don't want to see is something unrealistic, or if you're taking out inches in between rows, that's just not practical. It doesn't meet the intent of the ordinance. Or, you know, if you're going to have something kind of like a blob, again, that's very difficult to measure because everyone's allotted a certain size for a canopy, and we're there to ensure that that is what you have. Now, support areas are a maximum of 90% of your canopy area. So the easy example is if you have 10,000 square feet of canopy, if you have over 20 acres, then 90% of that would be 9,000 square feet. So that's in addition to your canopy. It could be in a structure, it could be exterior. It can be used for drying, curing, grading, trimming, storing, packing, labeling, immature plants. So we get that often. You could have, again, you can use your support area for immature plants, for starts. If you want to rotate your crop, that is something you can use in your support area. So this picture, or this graphic identifies an indoor structure with support area. Again, your site plan needs to label all this, show dimensions, show use. And you can see on the bottom right there, it measures out everything so we can have a total of what your support area is. Now, something else is ag exempt greenhouses. So ag exempt greenhouses are not a place of employment. Products are not processed, treated, packaged, nor shall it be a place used by the public. High and low tunnel greenhouses may be used by employees only related to the cultivation of crops. They have to be of simple construction using conventional construction methods. So if you're using concrete, steel, masonry, other technologies like that, those will not be ag exempt. I will say, however, we do allow drying in ag exempt hoop houses. So if you wanted to hang your plants to dry, that is one of the very few exceptions, what we mean by processing. So you can use your ag exempt greenhouse for drying. Now, additionally, ag exempt, no plumbing, no electrical, no mechanical utilities. It has to be a standalone. It does require a site plan review. It requires approval and issuance of what's called a letter of exemption from the Nevada County building official and planning director. So anything that doesn't meet the criteria that I just talked about, you need to submit a full set of construction plans and obtain a building permit. I will go into more detail on the electrical in a moment. So high and low tunnel greenhouses have to meet the following criteria. Easily movable, metal or plastic tubing. You can use agricultural cloth, plastic film, shade screening. The exits actually do have to be in compliance with the recently adopted editions of the California Building and Fire Codes. You do have to meet vegetation clearance requirements. You also have to maintain setbacks, and height limitations do apply. So to talk about the actual size of the ag exempt structure, it can be up to 3,600 square feet per acre maximum. So if you have 5 acres, you could potentially have 5 structures that are 3,600 square feet apiece. They cannot be any wider than 35 feet, 1 story tall. You have to have at least a 5-foot separation in between the structures. And when we say 3,600 square feet per acre, that means you can cluster them. It doesn't have to be an acre apart. So if you had 5 acres, you could have all 5 next to each other as long as they keep that 5 feet of separation. Now for some of the electrical, what we allow for high and low tunnel greenhouses that we've recently changed, you can have some electrical in there. And what it does is it requires a building permit you're allowed to have a maximum of one 20 amp circuit or 4 gang receptacle at each end of the structure. And I'll show you a graphic here in a minute. You cannot use extension cords, meaning whatever you use, fans or lights, it has to come from the manufacturer with a plug. So if that plug won't reach that outlet, it cannot be used with an extension cord. It has to plug directly into that outlet. Mounting of permanent exhaust fans into the walls of the greenhouse does not meet the intent of this policy. So permanent wall-mounted fans will require your greenhouse to be fully permitted, as well as consider oscillating fans are allowed, but it may possibly require an amendment or a noise study that Lucas mentioned earlier. Now, keep in mind when we talk about this, it's a separate electrical permit. So you'll have conduit going underground. The pedestal will pop up under the greenhouse, and you have a string of lights plugged into that. It can in no way touch the greenhouse. It has to have separate poles. So think of it like you have your electrical, that's all fully permitted, and then you just simply place a greenhouse over the top of it. Again, they cannot touch. So this graphic shows an example of what that pedestal would look like. Again, it needs to be permitted, and you can have one of these pedestals at each end of your greenhouse. So here's an example of what that would look like inside the greenhouse. You have your electric pedestal at each end. In this case, it splits between 2 planter boxes on each side, and then you have your independent supports for lights. Again, these supports would be poles mounted into the ground that in no way touch the greenhouse. So now there's also some associated permits and regulations. So it's not just cannabis, it's not just planning. There's other departments within the community development agency that are involved. In a moment, we'll have Amy talk about septic and well. We'll have Scott talk about fire. There's also potentially grading considerations. You might need a grading permit. Like Luke has talked about, the potential for a lot line adjustment or easement. If you're building structures, then obviously you're going to have to talk to the building department and get those permitted. Encroachment, so access to already established roads. And then there's other involvement with the state through Cannabis, because you need a license through the state of California and through the county's permit. You need approval through the water board, and you need approval through the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So it's not just the county you're working with, there are other agencies, although we cannot speak to them right now. We're just kind of focusing on what the county requires. And with that, I will pass it off to Amy Irani.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, everybody. Amy Irani. I'm the Environmental Health Director for the county. I'm going to talk to you really briefly about wells and septic requirements. And a lot of times, you know, when you're out on a property and you have a residence that is fed by a well, we have folks come in that say, I would like to use that well supply to irrigate our crops, and just want to keep it in your focus that when you're thinking about that, the minimum requirement for the residents is 1 gallon per minute, and there's often yields tests. So you don't want to create a situation where you're doing a lot of watering of your grow and your crop area, your vegetation area, and then you impact the resident supply. So there's alternatives. You can have storage tanks, you can do other things like that. But just to keep that in mind when you're developing your plan and when you're looking at the property, you know, where's the water coming from, and what type of supply do I have on property? And then if we could advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. The other aspect, recently we made some changes working with Diana and her team. We wanted to really tighten up what the demands were for septic systems and the use of portable toilets, and come up with a fair and equitable kind of working process for cultivators out there, farmers. So one of the things we found was that, you know, it would be more equitable and easier for farms that have 6 or fewer employees on an annual basis, we have allowed for the permanent full-time use of portable toilets. But this does require an annual permit. Any use of the portable toilets, there's an annual permit application, and you fill that out. Basically what we need to know is minimum requirements: one portable restroom, one portable hand sink set up with soap and water and paper towels. That has to come with an agreement that you associate with a company that supplies the portable toilet, but will also come out and service it. It's going to need to be serviced periodically depending on the use. We'd like to see it as often as possible and keep your hand sink stocked. So again, 6 or fewer, you can use the portable hand sink, and there's no end date or sunset for that. You can use it annually with the permit. Now, 7 or more, an operation where 7 or more employees, what we've come up with is you eventually need to have a permanent disposal system, a septic system for the operation, but we've given you 4 years to make that happen. So in that 4-year time frame, you continue to use the portable toilet and the portable hand sink and gauge it on the number of employees. We recommend 1 for every 10. So if your operation is pretty big, make sure you have adequate restrooms for your staff to use. They can get kind of yucky. So make sure you have them serviced often as well. So in the 4-year time period, what we're asking for an operation with 7 or more is that you start the process or start down the road of identifying an area on the property, which will be your disposal field, for lack of a better term. You're going to have your septic system and your disposal area. So you're going to want to work with a consultant, and you're going to want to figure out where on your property that would be feasible and the size of tank that you will need. So once that 4-year period passes, we want to make sure you have the soils testing done, you've submitted your application, and you have a good plan in place moving forward. So those are the kind of changes that we have to operations, and I think that'll be a good and fair, equitable process moving forward. And that concludes the information that I have. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Scott Ekman, Fire Marshal of Nevada County. Just kind of overview real quick, why the fire department and your fire officials and your fire marshals are so involved in your project. And on behalf of myself, Terry McMahon, and Clayton Thomas from Penn Valley, our number one goal is life safety. And given the current zoning for commercial cannabis, all project sites within the county generally fall within the SRA, or the state responsibility area. And the SRA, as defined as by the Board of Forestry, is held to a multitude of regulations and standards, including the state fire safe regulations, which is also referred to as Title 14, in which the county has adopted in its entirety. Other regulations that come into play on the fire side come from the additional ordinances and the California Fire Code. In brief summary, Title 14 touches on mainly 4 items, and we'll start covering those now. First off, address standards. Plain and simple, we need to be able to find you, whether it's a fire-related item or it's a simple medical aid. Say someone has a broken leg, we really need to be able to get to you. The address standards, obviously the slide's moving a little quick, but it's a 4-inch tall numeral correction with a 1/2 inch stroke on a reflectorized background with contrasting colors. For those parcels that do end up on a bidirectional road where we have resources coming from 2 directions, we may ask you to have the sign either marked on both sides or place additional signs. If there's additional access points, we may as well have those addressed as well. And then again, they're offered in a multitude of colors. Green is obviously the most popular I see around the county. And then we also may ask for, on some of these roads getting into these parcels where it's, there's a couple of splits, we may ask for some additional signage as far as clear, definitive direction so that fire, EMS, law can get to your site quickly and efficiently. Jason, go ahead. All right, it used to be emergency access and egress, and it's now changed to safe access and egress because it's not just in terms of an emergency. And we're going to talk about fire apparatus roads versus driveways real quick. Roads are two 10-foot lanes with two 2-foot shoulders on each side, making a 24-foot wide total. Fuel modification zone of 10 feet. It's not a clear cut. It's just thinning and limbing of materials. Obviously, less than 10% grade, and these are for roads. Can be gravel, and then above 10%, they need to be paved. And then the weight rating that we're looking for on roads is 75,000 pounds. And it went a little quick, but the picture of the CAL FIRE bulldozer is getting close to that weight rating. That's why we require it. Go ahead, Jason. Moving into the driveway standards, one 10-foot lane and 1-foot wide shoulders on both sides, a total of 12 feet. Again, fuel modification zone, 10-foot depth. Grades up to 16% can be gravel. Above 16% to 20% will need to be paved. And then slopes above 20% will not be allowed. And the weight rating we need to arrive at is 40,000 pounds or 4-inch of crushed AB. Go ahead. Common items that are required, both roads and driveways. First is the turnout, which is a widening of the roadway to allow a vehicle to pass. A minimum of 12 feet wide, 30-foot box, and 2 25-foot tapers on both ends. Driveways that are 150 to 800 feet in length will require one midway, and driveways that exceed 800 feet will require a turnout every 400 feet. And continuing on, Jason, with the turnarounds, it is a both hammerheads and terminus bolts. The hammerhead, as you can see the description there as far as the distances and sizes, a quick picture of one. And the terminus bolt is a minimum of 40-foot radius. And so understand those driveways that are over 300 feet, we're going to need to have these turnarounds, either it be a terminus bulb or a hammerhead within 50 feet of any commercial structure. All right, water supply. Again, for any commercial building within the SRA, available and accessible emergency water for wildland fire protection may be required if all not already protected by a municipal water supply, aka a hydrant out in the street. The most common and effective, of course, are the pictures in which you see the above ground storage tanks, and here's underground as well. These will be connected to a common fire valve, also known as a fire department connection. The emergency fire water or fire department water will be standalone and not used for irrigation. The location of the FDC and tank will vary site by site and will be in compliance with NFPA 1142 and will have a minimum gallonage required of 2,500 gallons. Defensible space. I hope everybody in the county is well versed on this common topic. It's plain and simple. We're focusing on that first circle around the house or zone 1 in this picture depiction, making sure that first 30 feet, the flammable vegetation is completely removed, and then we're extending that out another 70 feet or 100 feet in total, where the thinning and limbing up of hazardous and or flammable vegetation will continue in a tactful manner, a tasteful manner. It's not, again, it's not a clear cut. But again, it's proven so often, and especially in the recent years, the value of measures taken on your property for your structures before they're needed. A couple more fuel-related items. Real quick, the fuel modification zone, again, not a clear cut, but it's a fuel reduction, where we're thinning, limbing, and reducing, removing hazardous fuel brush. A 10-foot horizontal on both sides of the road and or driveway. And again, the annual grass is maintained throughout the season. This also includes a 15-foot vertical vegetation clearance measured from the outside edge from the roadway all the way into the terminus or hammerhead, the end of the driveway, if you will. So this is not going as quickly as I was hoping. So a couple of field modification successes. This is locally in the area where we had fire 360 degrees of this particular property. Property was in compliance and permitted, and there was not a single ounce of damage to any structures on that property. A couple other items that are will play into factor on any of your commercial projects, which is we need to be able to get into your site whether you're there or not. So that's going to be the requirement of a Knox box or a Knox padlock. So these are agency specific. So understand when you need to order a Knox box or a Knox padlock, you need to order it specifically to the agency in which is going to be arriving at your house first. You know, if you're in North San Juan, it's going to be a North San Juan Knox. Penn Valley, same thing. Again, the transmitting fire alarm will be required on all commercial structures, and that's the ability to alert the occupants of a hazardous condition, and subsequently at the same time get a fire dispatch started and en route without any phone calls whatsoever. And of course, with all buildings, and especially in the commercial fire code, fire extinguishers will be required per code. And in closure, we put together a list of these items, and they go into length and depth, and it hopefully covers them much better than this few handful of slides. And these are the items that we're going to be looking for in your site plans. These are the items that are needed to be compliant to get a conditional approval from us. They're available through the Alliance and through our website. And again, please refer to this checklist. It really will help you set up for success. And we're here for you from start to end, ensuring life safety and fire requirements are met along the way. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or any of the fire marshals.
All right, so looking at average review times, I know this was a question in the chat box. You know, how long will my project take? It's really hard to put, you know, a specific time out there because every project is unique. Every project has its own set of issues. But these are kind of the averages that we have thus far. So average project submissions is 3. That means it takes 3 times to finally get through the approval process. Our fastest, I think that still remains today, is 59 days. So that kind of gives you an idea if you had the perfect submittal, what that would look like. Our longest project approval is 212 days and counting. So this gives you kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. If you submit your application and just kind of, you know, fall off the map and don't really get back to us, it's just going to sit there and go on forever. So next slide. So tips, tricks, and lessons learned from staff. So the biggest one out of this whole slide is start the process early. If you're planning on growing for the 2021 season, you should be right now looking at design professionals, looking at your property. You should really be working on your project now. And that's because you really don't know what's going to come up. You don't know if you're going to have a management plan, if you're going to have issues with maybe existing structures or grading on your property. So start as early as possible. I kind of covered that second part. Have realistic expectations. So just because, you know, the fastest was 59 days and everybody thinks they have a perfect submission, give yourself a little more time than that. You'd be surprised at, you know, things that you find on your parcel and things that come back as comments or corrections. You can get a mentor. So like Diana mentioned, they have a buddy program that's been pretty successful. We've had several people from that program submit great applications. So, you know, contact the Alliance if that's a route you want to go. And if confused, communicate. We're here, like I said, 40 hours a week. Send us an email, give us a call. We're here to help you get permitted. Next slide. So tips and tricks learned from customers. So this is stuff that customers have told us has really helped them get permitted. So commit and stay on top of permitting until finalization. This is a huge one. We have a lot of people that, especially with the plants and ground allowance, they'll submit a application and then kind of focus on their cultivation. You really need to make the application and review process your priority, and try to keep continuing with that, respond to corrections, try to get resubmittals in as quickly as possible, because that'll really just help you get over that hump and get finalized a lot quicker. Consult with us with any ideas you have. If your parcel has a certain situation that you're not sure, will make you qualified, give us a call. We'll be happy to look at it. And then get a baseline assessment from licensed professionals. So make some phone calls, talk to some design professionals, ask them what, an average project costs. Try to get a full idea of what you're going to be investing in this ultimately before you begin. Next slide. So to continue with that, beware of consultants. There are a lot of really good consultants out there. There are a lot of consultants that aren't so good. Just because they're cannabis compliant, or sorry, cannabis consultant, doesn't mean they know what they're doing. So ask them a lot of questions. Make sure they're familiar with the process. Make sure that they've done some actual successful projects in the past. Don't just get discouraged. I know this seems like a lot of information. It's a lot of slides. Once you get started, it's amazing how quickly you start to roll through this. And plan on additional costs. There is additional fees depending on which fire jurisdiction you're in. There may be some impact fees. You may have to reach out to consultants, additional fees from design professionals, etc. So like any business venture, just make sure you have a buffer there to cover you once you start going down that path. Next slide. So that concludes our presentation. I know we have some questions in the chat, in the Q&A box. Craig, I don't know if you wanted to mention anything else before we start going through the questions.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to reiterate is kind of what Jeff had said just a bit ago. It's just, this is a lot of information. This is challenging to say the least. I do this every day and it is difficult to understand. And I don't know what the setback is for a septic system to a certain building, but I know somebody smart that does, so I asked them. The same thing, like, I don't know how much fire flow is required on a building that's 5,000 square feet for commercial cannabis, but I do know Scott, Clayton, and Terry, and they can tell me. So if there's anything you're going to take away from today, is just contacts, basic information, something to reference, and know who to ask the question to. And if you're stuck, reach out to some of our main contacts from this presentation that we're going to post online. So I think, Jeff, a lot of the questions were being answered as we go. There was a few I was writing down that we can expand on a little bit, and we can go through those, Jeff, if you want. The first one was transition period. There were several questions regarding that. So the transition period right now sunsets on May 14th. Correct, Jeff, right? So it sunsets on May 14th. So if you want to be able to qualify for a transition period as it currently stands, you have to apply prior to May 14th. Once you do apply, say you apply on May 13th, and you qualify for a transition period, you have 2 years from the date of application to bring all of your improvements unassociated to cannabis into compliance. So it's 2 years, 2 years. It's kind of confusing if you look at it that way. So hopefully that helps answer some of that. And I posted our cannabis FAQ in the chat as well. The link to that has a bunch of answers related to how does a dwelling unit tie into the transition period or anything else you can reference. If you go to our cannabis division website, you can just Google Nevada County Cannabis Compliance. There's a bunch of forms and handouts on that website that speaks to this a bit. Aaron had a question on here a little bit earlier that talked about, I think Clayton answered it, but just maybe if you can expand on it. He said he had a house at the end of his driveway, but he's going to have cultivation on site that's further up on his property. Does he have to have a fire safe driveway all the way to his house, or is it just to the cultivation area that he has? I don't know if one of the fire guys can answer that.
So once you get onto the property, you only have to build the appropriate fire apparatus access road to the commercial structure. So when the commercial structure is in between the property line or the access point and the private residence, we would not be regulating the quality or size of the driveway to that already permitted residence.
Thanks, Clayton. Seeing some other ones posted in the chat here. No irrigation in ag exempt hoops. No, you can have irrigation. Irrigation is allowed in ag exempt structures. Let me go to the Q&A here real quick. So Amy, if you see that question in there, it says for hazardous materials waste statement on the ADP, if we select number 1, what research do we need to share to justify the response? For putting no on number 2, how would you explain how you're not using hazardous materials?
Sure, thanks, Craig. That's an excellent question. So one of the main thing that we're looking for is your how are you storing? First, what type of product are you using? Does it fall in a category of hazardous material that needs some sort of permit or oversight? Initially, what we're looking for is what exactly are you using? If you're talking about normal, kind of what you would consider hazardous waste, household hazardous waste are exempt. For your processing and your plant, we're really looking for things that are in excess of what would be normally like for an average garden. We're looking for things that if you have any solvents of any type, if you have pounds or large quantities of solid material and fertilizers, that in the event they should spill or get into a waterway, this would be considered something that is reportable. And we would have to get in touch with, Fish and Wildlife and the State Water Board that we have a contamination issue. So we can look at what you put down as your specific list of items that you have and determine this is insignificant or doesn't meet a threshold that would require a permit. I don't know if that helps to answer your question, but if you have something specific and you have items on your property, just shoot me an email and I can go through that with you and clarify this yes would qualify, this no would not.
Thanks, Amy. Lucas, maybe you can help answer this next one in the chat. It says he has a 19-acre parcel and he would like to split off 6 acres. Will this allow me to have a combined 7,500 square feet of canopy? I live on a private road to his property. There's kind of a couple questions in there.
Yeah, the ordinance basically states that whatever parcel you're cultivating on is the one that you can cultivate to that size. So if you live on 6 acres and you have an adjacent 10 acres, then you could cultivate to the 10 acres would be 5,000 square feet. The larger issue there is probably going to be actually completing the subdivision. We're going to have to make sure you're not past dead end road standards and you're not violating your density. So it depends on your zoning as well. If you want to reach out to me, I can look at your parcel and go over the specifics with you and see if it's even a possibility.
Thanks, Lucas. Scott, maybe you can answer this next one. Do the fire access roads pertain to ag exempt greenhouses? And Clayton kind of answered this in the chat earlier. Maybe you expand on it.
So the fire access roads in relationship to ag exempt hoop houses, that fire access roads do not pertain. And those are the hoop houses that have the simple plastic overlay and do not have solid walls. I've noticed some people consider a hoop house a greenhouse, and others say a greenhouse is that which has solid walls you cannot easily get through. Therefore, we need to be able to gain access to any greenhouse that has a solid wall, and those that have the visqueen or otherwise plastic walls, we do not require fire access roads or driveways to.
Scott. Dinah, maybe you can help answer this question too, maybe with staff, is I would like to grow outdoors in the summer and indoors in the winter. Do I need both a type 1A and 1B license, or does 1B cover both in Nevada County? says I'm less than 10 acres, so I would have 2,500 square foot of canopy or less.
Sure. I do not recall the exact associations of the numbers next to the state licenses in this moment, but if you would like to cultivate both outdoors and indoors, you, number one, cannot exceed the canopy that is allowed for your parcel. And number two, you would need both of those licenses from the state as well.
Thanks, Dana.
One, or I guess, yeah, so one license would not cover outdoor and indoor. You would need separate. So yeah, just want to make that clear.
So I could add a little bit to that. Something to also think about is if that outdoor area you wanted to put an ag exempt hoop house over, that would fall under a mixed light license with the state, and that would keep one from needing an outdoor license and an indoor license. So there's some potential cost savings there.
This one's a message to you, Scott. When you say based on content relative to shipping containers, can you clarify? I'm not sure what that means, but maybe you do.
That was a previous question. So ship containers, there's a multitude of issues. We're trying to work on some solutions. However, in the hopeful very soon, I'm hopeful to bring forth some changes to ship containers. I still need a little bit of fine tuning, but the question as far as content, so depending on if it's if the storage, I guess my question was a little bit my answer was a little bit confusing to that question. He was asking about a small storage container, and I asked about it. Depends on its content. I mean, is it just storage? Is it storage of hazardous materials? Is it storage of garden tools or tools utilized for your campus site? So that's why I stated, depending on the content, is what will require different requirements or regulations.
So Scott, is the differentiation if it qualifies to be ag exempt or not, or is it different?
So ag exempt, so in the fire world, ag exempt does not exist. And so that's where it's oftentimes challenging for, to have the fire code meet the county ordinance in the same language. And so I lost my train of thought. The ag exempt doesn't exempt you from fire code and or fire regulations. Is that what you're asking, Craig?
Yeah, I was just asking if, based on the content of the question, like, if it's completely exempt and qualifies for that, is there additional regulations related to access alarms, all the other stuff, or is it different from the ag exemption, I guess? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So currently, as it stands, go ahead, Terry.
Well, I would just probably say that if you're using it strictly for storage and not for any part of the commercial process other than storage, so you're not going to have employees, you're not going to be processing in there, then they don't need to be alarmed or anything like that. But if you're doing any other processes, then they need to meet those requirements.
So if I could, just to tag on to what Chief McMahon said, I use a test something like this. If it looks like the kind of gardening implements you would have in a shed at home, then that would be a shed for gardening implements. But if you're conducting any part of a commercial operation in that shipping container, building, whatever it is, then that's when it becomes a structure. And at that point, it's subject to all the things that structures typically are.
Ronnie had a question related to, these used to be group U, right? So he's talking about building code occupancy types that are assigned to buildings. Not necessarily, the occupancy types specific in the building code that apply to structures isn't really relevant to ag exempt structures or not, because you could have an ag exempt structure that's a group U occupancy for the building code, and you could have a fully permitted structure that's a group U. So it really has no bearing on it. Yev, I don't know what you mean. You said how much would be required in the Q&A? If you could expand on that in a question. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about on that question. Another question is, can you have an ag exempt greenhouse with an automatic blackout arm that rests on the top of the greenhouse and rolls down from either side? Thomas, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. So automatic is going to be the term that I'm going to catch on to there. So we do allow depping. However, the automatic would be considered mechanical. And if you look to our ag exempt ordinance, the mechanics of that aren't appropriate.
Maybe on that, it's kind of a similar question. Is an electrical depth motor system allowed on the exterior of ag exempt greenhouse?
Yeah, so that'd be the same. That's basically the same question. So, you know, the arms with the hand rolls are fine as soon as you're powering those with any mechanical, you know, the motors that are at the top of those aren't consistent with our ag exempt policy.
This other question relates to kind of flip-flopping cultivation based on uses, and we've discussed this internally over the last couple months because it's interesting. We haven't had this question until recently, but it talks to, you know, can I have 1,000 square foot outdoor and then 1,000 square foot indoor? So cultivating completely outdoor during the summer and then switching to 1,000 indoor. So Jeff, maybe, I don't know if you want to answer that or have somebody else do that.
Yeah, it's possible. You just have to be really specific in your operation plan. So, you know, there's certain times of the year, obviously, that you're going to swap back and forth. That needs to be very detailed in that operation plan. So specific dates, and you're going to have to stick to those dates regardless of the weather. Hopefully that answers it. It's also kind of case specific. So, you know, you might want to call us and give us a little more detail.
There's another question in the chat. If you have 3 licenses at all different properties in Nevada County, can you process all materials from those 3 properties in one processing building on one piece of land? So harvesting and transporting with a transportation license to save cost for the 3 processing buildings separately. Jason, you want to take a stab at that one?
So if you have 3 separate licenses, which is the maximum that you're allowed to have in Nevada County, and you want to bring them all to one property for processing, that is possible. But bear in mind, everything has to be tracked, traced. You'll be using the state system metric to do that, and you need a licensed distributor to move that. So again, everything has to be in the legal realm. So when you're transporting it back and forth, you have to have a license to do so, or hire somebody that has that license. And then again, that building that's being processed in, you know, depending on how you're processing it, it's going to have to meet those commercial standards. But the simple answer is yes, it is possible.
I'm going to add to that, which is that the state requires you to have not just, you would have to have a processing license to be able to do that legally. You cannot, even if at the state level, if you have 3 different license types, even though you're the owner of all 3, you can't all process on one location. That this is a state requirement. You'd have to have a processor license, a specific standalone processor license to be able to do that legally. I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions about that after this meeting if you want to reach out to the Alliance.
Thanks, Dan.
There's been a couple questions about exhaust fans and ag exempt. So do you know how exhaust fans can be used in ag exempt greenhouses during the summer nights if light pollution is not allowed? And exhaust fans are not allowed to be mounted on the greenhouse structure with new electrical allowance. Thomas, you want to take a pass at that question, and maybe Lucas, you can speak to the noise part of that.
Currently, to my knowledge, that we're not permitting the exhaust fans on ag exempt structures. It kind of goes back to what Jason identified with the lighting, is everything is sitting over top of what is existing. Now those 14-inch oscillating fans, those aren't seeming to be an issue. Lucas, you could approach the sound issues with those exhaust fans, but I could get back to whoever has that question with some, further descriptions. But as of right now, those would have to be mounted in a way that aren't consistent with the ag exempt policies.
Yeah, as to the noise produced by fans, if you're planning on using fans in your operation, along with any other noise producing equipment, we will ask that you provide specifications from the manufacturers with the decibel rating. If you have more than 3 sources of noise, that's kind of the limit that we allow for you to do your own noise calculation. So you'll have to have a sound study prepared by an acoustical engineer. And they can do the cumulative noise production at each property line, which is kind of what we're looking for to make sure that it doesn't exceed 40 decibels at property lines. If you have any more questions about that, feel free to reach out to me.
Hey, Thomas, can you put your contact information in chat so that person can reach out to you? Thanks. If you have 2 adjoining 20-acre parcels, does there have to be a 100-foot setback between each set of greenhouses on each parcel? Jason, you want to take a stab?
Sure. So if you have 2 separate parcels, they still have to, or 2 separate parcels that you own, they're adjacent, you want to have a greenhouse on each one, you still have to meet that 100-foot setback from the property boundaries. So even though you own both, you're cultivating on both, you still have to meet that setback. That's just something that's always going to happen. The reasoning behind that is we're always kind of thinking long-term. In the future, if you want to sell off one of those parcels, now all of a sudden the parcel that's left is not going to meet that 100-foot setback. And while you may own them for 100 years, we don't know that. So you do have to maintain that 100-foot setback even if you own both adjacent parcels.
Next question, Yev was back on there, talking about how, I think it's, how do you figure out how much fire flow or water storage you need on site? So if they're unsure, how do they figure that out? Scott?
So the required amount of stored water that is required in the rural areas is dependent on the cubic footage of the largest structure on the property. And so there's a formula that we use, the cubic footage, and then also multiplied by its, divided by its construction type, whether it's steel, masonry, wood, and then it comes into a multiplier of what's going on inside that building. And generally speaking, we use the multiplier of 1.5 for a large portion of the county based on its distance to either a bidirectional road or its distance down a dead-end road standard. Is that kind of sort of, it completely is dependent 100% of the cubic footage of the commercial structure.
So if I'm not
And that
good,
information, it's contained in NFPA 1142.
Thank you, Terry.
so if I'm terrible at math like I am and don't know where to look, what's the best advice?
Shoot, please give me an email or give me a phone call, and I'll be happy to run a general rough estimate on the stored gallonage for water storage. But our minimum is 2,500 gallons.
Thank you, guys. For the issue of exhaust fans, how will you handle ones that run on solar only? Thomas, since you're the ag exempt electrical guy, you're getting another one.
Yeah, that's a good question. the whole intent is to not have something mounted to a easily movable framed-in structure. I'd like to actually maybe reach out to this person and ask how they propose to do that. Maybe they can assist me in answering that question with an example. Everybody's creative, and we don't have all the answers until we often see it. So all my contact is in there. Feel free to email me and think and provide to me how you would, meet the intent without, having a hard in-sided mounting system.
Jeff, maybe you can answer this next one. It says, does bucking fall under the needs for a processing space and facility? My harvest ends after bucking once dried and cured in an ag-exempt greenhouse.
I'll put my email in there and let's talk about it.
That's a fancy governmental way of saying it depends.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit. That's a good question because I saw that one and I was kind of anticipating it coming my way. Our support area is drying, curing, grading, trimming, rolling, sorting, packaging. So, we're leaning towards the support area with bucking, but yeah, shoot Jeff or I an email and Jeff and I could have that conversation.
Next question is from Gregory. If all 3 permits are all adjacent and you don't need to leave off the road, will you need a distributor for transport to get us to the central processing permitting location on the adjacent parcel? Jason, you want to answer that one?
That I honestly don't know. I imagine if you own all adjacent parcels and you're not leaving technically any parcel you own, I would have to think you would not. But that's something I'd have to research that. So email me, and then I can look further into that.
I'll say this too, that as it relates to, this is going to reflect back on some of the statewide requirements. So definitely we can help you out with this one at the Alliance. So feel free to attend the support group on Monday that we're going to be hosting. We're also going to be having a follow-up call with or a workshop specifically with the state, but we're happy to walk you through that one as well.
So there's a question, can our owner-operated farm dry in existing ag storage buildings awaiting building permits in our transition plan? If it's not permitted for that commercial use as it's defined, then it can't be used for that. With that, I'll say we've had a few that have had prior buildings permitted. Like there was a winery that was permitted, that they had an existing building. They didn't have to do anything to that building because it met all the standards and everything. So what we did is just a technical change of use on that structure, but they didn't have to do any improvements. So it's possible, but it's rare. It has to be fully permitted, meet all the requirements for building and the fire codes to be used. Let's see here. Zena has, instead of sending cannabis to processing facility, can we use mechanized trimming machines to process the products on site? If yes, can this be done outdoors? Also, is a permit required for this at either county or state level? So Dana, maybe you can help me out with the state level side of it, which I believe would be, and then Thomas, maybe you can answer the county side.
Yeah, so you do, included with each cultivation license is the ability to process on site your own cannabis. You do not need an additional processor license. Somebody might get a processor license when they want to process for other people as a service, or if they have multiple license types that they want to process in a central location. But to process your own cannabis, you do not need a state processing license, and or a local.
Yeah, and this question, it seems like the community is having this discussion, because this is probably the third time today that I've had this question asked. Where I'm getting caught up is, these mechanical devices being plugged in outdoors with, we'll have to ensure there's a pedestal drop for power. It's not a question I have an answer to right now, but I could reach out to this person and after I get some clarification. But it is a question currently that we should get an answer to, because it seems to be a hot topic.
Well, we'll plan on doing too. We have that cannabis FAQ on our website. We'll update that with this question, because Thomas is right. We've received it multiple times. That way we have some clarification for people moving forward.
And what I would imagine is that whatever is used for traditional ag for temporary use of equipment should apply. So I would say, like, let's start there. Thank you.
Next question, to follow up on our previous question of an auto dep greenhouse becoming ag exempt, and if the motor does not come with a plug and is hardwired to a control panel that is solar powered by DC battery and mounted independent and living outside of the actual greenhouse structure. In general speaking, I'll just answer this, Thomas, that this is not going to meet the exemption. So just as a general rule, anything like this is not going to meet the exemption. If you feel that it may, for whatever reason, reach out to us. We'll look at the exact details of what you're doing, as this policy was modified, just a couple months ago. So it's fairly new, and we're still looking at different applications that may work. Brittany asked, you are not able to exhaust air mechanically when your ag exempt hoop is covered for blackout. I think the question is, you can't mount exhaust fans on one of the sides to be able to exhaust air. Thomas, want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, we're getting caught. So I think the easiest way to offer clarification on an ag exempt hoop house is the intent of the policy. Our policy is to give you guys that early season start, that late season protection, let you get your depth going. A lot of our questions tend to scope around turning these ag exempt structures into, doing multiple turns a year, basically getting an unpermitted greenhouse. So when you're proposing, when you're thinking about what you're doing with your ag exempts and how you're going to propose your project, I would defer to early season protection, or early season start, late season protection, some veg lighting, light depth, and once you start to get outside those parameters of the intent, that's where these questions start to get complicated.
And just generally speaking, the intent of this was to provide more flexibility for those that are trying to get more out of their cultivation based on the mixed light use. So the intent wasn't to have a fully automated greenhouse or anything like that, like we've seen at a lot of sites. So if really that's what you want, I would focus on getting a permitted greenhouse. That's going to be worth your time and money more than trying to figure out a way around that rule. Allison had a question about cannabis licenses for private events, multi-use facility packaging, not for cultivation, but for processing, packaging, labeling, and/or events. Lucas, I don't know if you want to take a stab at that one.
Yeah, event centers in Nevada County, which rural properties are eligible for, do require a use permit. And as you're going through that use permit process, if you have cannabis on site, there may be a conflict of use there. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but that's something that would be under review during that process. And we haven't really tested it because we haven't had anyone apply for that yet. But regardless, if you are doing commercial events on site, then you will need a use permit for it. And you can contact me for the application if you're interested in that.
Last question we have in Q&A right now is, go ahead, Dinah.
I want to speak to the events question. And currently we do not have an events license that's approved in the county. So that's something that's policy that would need to shift to allow cannabis events. So I would say, Allison, to definitely make sure that you're involved with the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance. These are conversations that we are having right now about some of these license types. And then there had been a question that I saw about micro licenses that somebody else had. I don't know who asked that question, but again, that is something that you want to make sure that you are an active member and involved in the discussions with the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance as we talk about some of the next steps, et cetera. So just make sure to stay engaged.
Next question, are engineered plans required if no grading is needed and site plans are to scale? So I think this speaks to cannabis application submittals. And Lucas, you mind answering that one?
If there is no construction that's going to occur for the operation, say you're doing only outdoor, no on-site processing, no grading required for the outdoor cultivation, then we won't require engineering. You could just have a site plan that is to scale and an operations plan. That's absolutely acceptable.
We've had several applications, especially early on, you know, they call them our legacy farmers that first started. A lot of them did it themselves. Depending on some of them had challenges more than most, and we wouldn't recommend doing that if you don't have any experience. We would strongly recommend that you use a licensed professional, as it's going to be a quicker process and more seamless. But it's definitely possible. Last question in here: if you have a private road which neighbors use as easement, though your property to get to their property, does the canopy need to be 100 feet away from that road? Does that make sense, Lucas? Can you answer that one?
Yeah, if that easement falls within a right-of-way, then we'll treat it as a right-of-way for building purposes. It's not a 100-foot setback. It's either 45 feet from the center line of the right-of-way if it's 50 feet or less. And if it's over 50 feet, then it's 20 feet from the edge of right-of-way. You'll still need screening for your cannabis so that your neighbors won't see it as they're passing through. If it's an access easement, those do not have setbacks at all. So you'll have to see what type of easement it is.
The last question in the chat is from Wayne. I live on a dead-end road with one residence past mine. I own property on both sides of the road, so it's an easement. Does my support building still have to maintain setbacks? That's kind of the same question that you had, right, Lucas?
Yeah, it's the same question. If it's a right-of-way, then you'll have to maintain standard right-of-way setbacks for any structure.
I have one more for you, Lucas. I was under the impression that anything over 10% slope needs a topo survey by civil engineer, even if no grading or construction will occur. Is that true?
No, that would only be if there was grading or construction. But if it's just natural topography, just indicate the slope so we know what type of topography we're looking at. But we won't require any engineering for that.
There's a question in the chat that says, are there any setbacks to power lines? If there are easements related to those utilities, possibly. It just depends on those easements. If it's setbacks from cultivation, like overhead for power lines, and there aren't any easements, no, not any for outdoor. There are clearances to buildings per the California Electrical Code, and if that's the case, you can talk to the building department and reach out to us, and we can give you that information. I have this last question in Q&A, and then we'll hand it off to you, Dinah, to wrap up. Joel says, does ag exempt have to have a fence around the hoop? Thomas.
Yeah, so what we're going to be looking for is your project to be secured as required by the ordinance. So each hoop doesn't have to be secured by a individual fence, you know, but it'd probably be the best interest to wrap it into your project as a perimeter fencing. Ag exempt hoops, you know, can be secured. They're often rolled up. They don't have hard end walls, unlike a hard-sided greenhouse that actually has a lock on the outside without roll up.
Thanks, Thomas. All right, Dana, it's off to you.
All righty. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to just say a couple closing remarks here. First thing, thanks to all county staff for joining us. And definitely reach out to them. County staff has been incredibly accessible and available, so that's a great resource. Somebody had asked a question about the Buddy program, and to get signed up with the Alliance Buddy program, again, this has been a really successful program. Email us at info@nccannabisalliance.org. It is in the chat. Maggie has put it in the chat, and we can get you information about the Buddy program. Really great way to navigate this. There are a lot of questions with cannabis permitting, and this is a great way to help navigate it. From the Alliance, we just want to let you know that you are not alone in this process. We have so many resources to help support you, so please reach out. We're happy to talk to you about membership, about the various benefits, and the ways that we can help you. On Monday, let's continue this conversation. On Monday at 3 p.m., we're going to have an extended chat about permitting, so please join us to find out about that and about membership. Again, email info@nccannabisalliance. That's the best way. And also, this workshop is recorded, as is all of our Get Legit workshops. And so, great resource for people to find out how to get access to that. Email us. It's available for all of our members. And a couple other things I want to say are, yeah, you're not alone in this process. You're really not alone. We've got a lot of farmers who have been here that have gone through the process. It sounds like a lot, but we can help navigate it with you. We're here to support you. I think that was a mouthful. Thank you all. And I don't know if anyone else has anything to say, but
I'd just like to say, if anybody has any questions, either reach out directly to the county or the Cannabis Alliance, because I get some calls from asking some very strange things that people hear. They hear from somebody else. Reach out to the source for the best answer, either the county or the Cannabis Alliance.
thank you so much for saying that, Jason. The rumor mill is so strong, and it's actually I enjoy debunking rumors. It's a lot of fun. So please give us a call, and we can let you know what's up. And our next Get Legit workshop is going to be on required environmental compliance. The one after that is on state licenses. And we've got several different business skills trainings coming up, as well as all the other calls I mentioned at the start of this one. So thank you all. Have a great night. Hi.
Fish in many California water bodies contain mercury at levels that can be harmful to human health if eaten.
Mama, what's that sign?
Oh, well, it looks like it's about fish in California lakes and reservoirs. So it looks like some fish are high in mercury and some fish are lower in mercury. Oh, here we go. Women 18 to 45 years, so that's me. And then kids, that's you. We can have less than older women and men. So Papa can have more fish than us.
What kind of fish can we eat?
Well, it looks like we can have more rainbow trout. That must be low in mercury. Oh, but you and I, we can't have any black bass, any carp, or any brown trout.
Papa brings us fish.
Yeah, he does. We should take a picture of this for him. Oh, and then look, there's a website we can go to for more information. That's good. All right, well, let's see if we can find some fish now.
The amount of fish you can safely eat depends on where you fish, what fish you eat, and who you are.
This is a story of gumption, perseverance, and damn luck. It starts with this man.
Charles Litton was Einstein brilliant.
He was a genius, made countless contributions to the high technology of his time, vacuum tubes. In 1953, he moved from a young Silicon Valley to Grass Valley, California.
I think that's what happens, right? A lot of us, we found a way to get to Nevada City, Grass Valley, or we found it for the first time, and we don't want to leave.
Soon after, he talked his friend Dr. Donald Hare into starting his engineering business in the same mountain town.
Doc Hare, Grass Valley, I believe came to Grass Valley almost as much for the area as everybody else, but he knew Litton.
Doc Hare and a small cadre of incredibly talented engineers quickly made their mark on a new technology that was captivating the world: television.
Grass Valley knew how to do things with a transistor that previously took a tube.
What came next is decades of innovation, ultimately leading to dozens of spin-offs and related technology companies who themselves made countless world-changing contributions.
How they got to television is this circuitous path of technology that I don't think anyone would ever predict.
The fact that any of this happened at all is technically improbable.
From the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, a new hero will emerge. One who is ready. One who makes sure their friends and family are set. And has the power to go at a moment's notice. This fire season, you're the hero. We are Ready Nevada County.
One of our goals as an agency is to bring that awareness that in our community there's still needs out there for firewood, especially in the senior population, and that as together as a community, we can meet that need.
Each year gets a little harder and a little harder, but just seeing this, I feel like one of the lucky ones.